Hi guys, welcome to Alive, my search for the best way to live. My name is Jigga Jr. and today our guest will be a licensed psychologist, actually is a licensed psychologist. Of course, he's also part of that volunteer group for mental health for those who are suffering during this COVID-19 mentally. We have Emmanuel Villoria Hernani, otherwise known to the world as Doc Tata. Hi, Doc.
Hello, good afternoon, Ziggy, and good afternoon to our listeners or our viewers for this afternoon show.
Thank you so much, Doc. Our topic for today, Doc, for Alive is this is our mind on lockdown mode. We're going to talk about how this lockdown has affected us psychologically and how we can turn things around and make things better for all of us. But before I go and ask you those questions, Doc, I'd like first and foremost to ask you, how did you get into psychology, Doc? Has it always been the course that you wanted since you were little, or how did you stumble into this field of psychology?
Actually, I was not familiar with psychology before, and then when I shifted from one course to another, one time my cousin saw me, and then she invited me to join her in the program of psychology in San Carlos. And at that time, she mentioned to me that all we do is just to talk, cry, and there were plenty of women around, classmates. So that's why I shifted to psychology, and since that time on, so I was very much endeared with the course and the program, and then so that's why since then, way back in I think in 1991 or 1992. So I have been into this psychology thing. So I have been into practice since so for around 20 years already. So as a psychologist.
What is it that you practice exactly, Doc Tata?
I'm into counseling and therapy, and at the same time, I'm also into research and training. As a counselor or therapist, I do Gestalt therapy. So I cater to clients who have problems, domestic victims of domestic violence, those who are into substance use disorders, and family problems. And of course, I'm also into forensic. So I also go to courts to attend to forensic issues, like, for example, nullity of marriage, issue on child custody or child adoption, and also cases on domestic violence and drug abuse also.
Doc,
So, yes, sir. Yes, Zig.
for a long time, especially in the Philippines, there's always been a stigma nga ato ka og psychologist or psychiatrist, right? Murag buang ka or whatever. Has that perception changed, Doc? Kung consult ka og psychologist, for example, let's just say, let's go back, since you've been in the industry for 20 years, let's go back 10 years ago or maybe 20 years ago. Has the perception of talking to a psychologist or psychiatrist changed here in the Philippines, in Cebu in particular?
Actually, before, no, there was a stigma. In fact, when you would see someone like a psychologist or psychiatrist, then when you would go out to the clinic, then people would always label you as someone who is crazy, mentally ill, or buang. But right now, and I think it started way back in 2000, I think 2008 or 7. Surprisingly, there were many people who would already refer their friends or even them. No, they would voluntarily submit to therapy, and I think the community right now is very much aware of the need for mental health. So that's why we are now more open and embracing to the fact that we do need psychologists or psychiatrists or adult mental health professionals.
So you feel the people consulting psychologists or psychiatrists have increased through the years?
Yes, and as I mentioned, way back in 2007 and 2008, at the time when I was very much into practice, and then that's the time when I also my personal professional experience has been widened because of the fact that there were many people who called me for counseling or for therapy and for other things.
So, would you say a dramatic increase, a slow increase in terms of consultations? And like everybody goes to a doctor if they feel some physical ailment, right? But very few go to a psychiatrist or psychologist for their mental problems. Do you feel nga nag-increase, nagdaghan? There are more people now who are consulting you compared to, let's say, 10 years ago? Nagadaghan ba, Doc, or wala, plateau na?
Actually, yes, nakadaghan siya actually, and I think it's because of the social media and at the same time movies, no TV series, no. And in fact, when I would ask someone, no, for example, a client, no, how come she went for a treatment, and I think there was a time then she mentioned to me that she saw a movie, of someone doing counseling and therapy, and she liked the idea of going into therapy, and I think it's because on her to her, maybe on her mind, she thought that it's an elitist or somewhat classy to be engaged with a therapist. No, not of course intimately, but professionally with a therapist. So that's why she ventured into therapy or treatment. And at the time, it's because of what she saw on TV. So I think social media and the TV, TV shows or the series, TV movies, series, uh, partly contributed to the awareness that we need mental health professionals.
So at least Cebu now is more welcoming when it comes to consulting a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Their perception of it has improved dramatically. That's good to hear. Doc, we are now in the age of this coronavirus, this pandemic, and what does a pandemic do to the brain, Doc? Because we're battling two things here. Of course, the pandemic, the crisis that we have at hand, the uncertainty of the future, and the lockdown, our isolation. We are only in a small confined room in our homes, only perhaps we're alone, perhaps we're only with a limited number of people, and we see them every day, longer than usual. So I guess we are attacking two things here, the crisis, the pandemic, and our isolation. What does it do to us mentally, though?
Actually, our brain or our person would try to adjust, and in fact, with adjustment, we try to do things differently compared to before. When we say we have these normal activities, we try to do still normal activities in some way, but of course, there are actually changes that would come as we go by with our quarantine period. So that's why, as time would go by, we would experience some sort of distress and discomfort because we would try to adjust, and our brain would tell us that you need to adjust because of the fact that the changes not only is physical but also psychological, in the sense that we all would often hear in the news or in the social media that this and that has been affecting this particular community, and this has been going on and on. So not only that we are trying to physically adjust to our new normal, but also to our psychological thing, the inputs that we would gain from listening to the different media that we have in the house.
So I know you cannot, this situation that we are in now. They have different reactions to to these different stressors. But generally, though, what happens to your brain? Like, what happens to you? Get is it making you more depressed? Is it making you more? What does it do? A typical person, what happens to the typical person if he's, let's say, on lockdown? Meaning to say, he has to think about the uncertainty of the future, and number two, he has to think about talking to the same people over and over again, and watching bad news over and over again, and all that stuff. Dok, makabuang ba na, Dok?
Actually, as common for us, actually, is to do our routine, and of course, we have routine. For example, if you used to work, or if you are working, and then basically your routine is house, and then you go to your place of work, and then go back home. So this is your routine, but right now it's changing. So you are working maybe from home, or you are no longer working, but you are just staying home. So there are changes actually with your routine, and this with this situation, then the person would try to adjust, and then our brain also, which is used also to the routine, would also try to adjust, and that's why we will have discomforts. And so eventually, if the discomfort or distress is very overwhelming, then it won't affect not only emotionally but psychologically the person, and eventually it would affect the relational aspect of the person, wherein there would be conflict in the family with other people. So it would escalate from a simple as emotional psychological distress into a form of relational or social distress that would affect the whole family as well.
So, mora siya og it aggravates the situation that you're already in.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, basically, it would aggravate actually. Yeah, the situation, especially if you don't have, for example, you don't have personal resiliency. I mean, you have also have psychological or emotional problems even before you this crisis has started, or maybe there's a conflict in the family, and this would exacerbate, meaning this would trigger or this would reinforce your emotional or your psychological distress. So
They say,
basically,
Doc, that the coronavirus, the most susceptible are the elderly, right? And the people who have preconditions. Now, for mental health, Doc, who are the most vulnerable, the most susceptible, Doc, in terms of mental health? What kind of mental condition is susceptible to a lockdown? Meaning to say, you're confined in a small space, and the future is quite uncertain.
it on the psychological part, it would depend on the role that you play inside the house. So if you are the breadwinner, or someone who is the head of the family, then basically you have a great role to play. The responsibility is on you, and these responsibilities are more taxing psychologically, emotionally than physically. So that's why on the psychological side, it's not really the the elderly or the younger ones, and in fact, they are the younger ones. The children are not really that stressed right now compared to the to the adults. Though of course they would become stressed because they could no longer play and go out, meet with friends, or go to school. But as you can see, it's not only the children who is affected, and if you're gonna have some assessment or some sort of a measurement on among the members of the family who are mostly affected psychologically and emotionally, and I think it would be the adults, because they would think what to eat tomorrow, what to do next after this and that. So basically the burden is on the person and the adult, especially those who
So
have
the breadwinners are.
yeah, those persons who have role to play in the family, who would want to make the family work. And so aside from making the family work, he also, or that person will also have to think about himself or herself. How would he or she struggle, as time would go by, where to find food, what to do next. So of course that would become taxing to the person as well.
So what are the symptoms, Doc? What happens to you? What are the symptoms, Doc? So what kind of symptoms will eventually show once you are all stressed out because of the uncertainty of the future, and of course you're in isolation as well. So yung mga symptoms, Doc?
Yes, sir. We have different reactions actually, or should we call this symptoms, no? And sometimes people would show irritability, would become irritable, they would easily get angry. And there are people who would avoid, become isolated, and they would go just stay inside the room, they would not talk. And there are people who would, instead of avoiding or getting irritable, they would displace their frustrations, their boredom onto other things, like for example doing cooking, cleaning the house. So there are actually many ways, and in fact some of these are maladaptive and some of these are adaptive to the situation, and it would depend really to what context and to the situation that the person is in. So basically we
No,
have
what do
many
you mean?
ways.
What do you mean, Doc? When you say maladaptive and adaptive, what can you expound on that, Doc? What do you mean?
Yeah, for
Maladaptive
example,
and adaptive.
yeah, if the person, for example, no, as I mentioned, no, cleaning the house, if the person would clean the house all day all night, and she would do nothing but clean the house, and then
Clean.
tomorrow again she would clean the house, and that would become maladaptive in the sense that it has become a routine actually, that would eat the other, the other dimensions of the person, where she could no longer invest on something more productive aside from, from cleaning the house. And in fact, she would no longer talk with his or her loved ones, because what she would want to do is just to clean the house, and that's actually a form of fixation. So if you, yeah, so it's like actually you are getting attached to a sense of comfort, no, or to activity that is comforting to one person. So just like, drinking, like for example, moderate drinking, of course, alcohol has some forms of sedative effect, though it is a stimulant at the same time, a sedative chemical. Then, but of course, if you just drink moderately, it would be okay. But if you would go to the extent of binge drinking, then that would become a problem. So it would become maladaptive in the sense. I don't recommend drinking, but there are actually people now, of course, inside the house that they would drink, and to make themselves, feel relaxed and comfortable with the situation. But that's okay. That's adaptive mechanism. But as I said, if you go to the extent of binge drinking, then it will become maladaptive.
Doc, what are the mental conditions that are most susceptible to a lockdown, Doc? I mean, like, kind of mga pre-existing mental conditions, so that can be exacerbated by stress, like uncertainty and in isolation.
There are actually, like for example, if the person is depressive, I don't call it with depression, but depressive symptoms. This can also be a sort of a problem. And person who is always anxious, or we call that would have anxiety symptoms. And of course, persons who have problems with self-control, like persons who are irritable, impatient, obsessive compulsive. These are some of the, the symptoms or the problems that we can say common, not only in the crisis situation or during the quarantine, but also before the quarantine, and also people who have problems with psychosis. Like for example, there are actually persons who have a paranoia, meaning over suspiciousness. So this lockdown can also trigger some sort of problem. So actually, it's not only one symptoms or one set of problems or mental illness, but many actually.
Doc, we have been on lockdown for, I don't know, I can't remember, 45 days or more or less, somewhere within the vicinity, depending on where you are. What are the short term and are there long term repercussions, Doc? Maybe the ill effects of the lockdown will not be felt yet now immediately when things start opening up, but maybe like a delayed reaction now by short term, and is there also a long term effect of a lockdown?
If I am to say, if I am a naysayer, a doomsday naysayer, I would say that the psychological effect would extend until even the lockdown would be lifted. So in fact, our problem would not be at this particular juncture of the crisis, but after the lifting of the lockdown, because people would try again to adjust to the new normal. And in fact, there would be people who would be afraid of going out, of going to the office, and that's the why they would still prefer to stay home rather than go to the office. So that would become another form of adjustment. So that's why I think this mental health crisis would continue until the lockdown would be lifted.
So now short-term, immediate effect, and not such a sort of like a long-term effect.
When I say, if we would say that there's a short-term effect, then this is the short-term, the anxiety part. But after this lockdown, if it would be prolonged, the anxiety would be prolonged, it would become another set or clusters of problems. So that's why we use the term exacerbate, because if this is anxiety, of course, normal. It's nothing to worry. Though it's something that is uncomfortable, it's distressing, it's discomforting. But anxiety is part of our way of acting to a new norm or to a new situation. But if it would extend, like for example, to that's why we have in psychology or in psychiatry, we have this a period, of seeing things if it's still normal or not. So sometimes we say 2 weeks would be fine, and then 1 month would be fine, 6 months would be fine. No, until 6 months, then we could say that this is a problem. This needs medical or psychiatric or psychological attention. So in this case, there are actually long-term effects. So that's why I would say that um, as a psychologist, I would say that there are more problems to come psychologically after this the lifting of this quarantine actually.
Doc, you mentioned earlier, people become irritable. You exacerbate your current situation. Before the pandemic, it becomes worse during the pandemic. Doc, to avoid these things, what can we do right now? People watching this interview right now in their homes, perhaps all stressed out, uncertain about the future, and they're looking at the same people over and over again, having the same conversations, and they're getting sick and tired of each other, and or getting more stressed out with uncertainty of the future. What can we do right now?
Okay, first, of course, we have a routine. So continue with our routine. No, so for example, if you have a routine in the house, then we should continue with the routine in the house. And then, of course, there are changes. And like for example, if you are a working person, and then changes has become, um, um, should I say, prominent on you. Like for example, you are no longer allowed to work or go out, and then there's another routine. So do other things while inside the house. Like for example, if you have a big area, then you do some gardening or cleaning the house. So it's another form of routine actually, in as an alternative to what you will do if you are in the office, and that's a routine actually. And to be socially, inclined, or relationally inclined, talk to the other person. If you are with your family, then spend quality time with your family, talking about this and that, and then minimize, the use of social media, especially the naysayers, the doomsday soothsayers who would always say negative. Of course, this is a crisis situation, but as actually, when you say crisis, it's a short term, maybe it's 6 months or 3 months, a time of distress or discomfort. But actually, we can actually surpass, this crisis. So instead of listening to negative news, unfounded, irrational, illogical, uh, bits of information coming from any other person, though, we'll just focus on one thing or two credible media sources or information source, to feed our curiosity and our anxiety as well, so that we can alleviate our anxiety with some sort of hope, and sense of security and comfort. Third, I think number three, so psychologically, we have, and I think it's over the internet, the use of mindfulness. We call that awareness exercise in Gestalt. Also, so we should be, instead of investing our time also outside, looking at the problems outside externally, which we are not in control with. So why not to focus on our person? So you do some forms of introspection or reflection, and we can call that mindfulness. So we have to be aware of our person. We have to be aware of our anxiety, because anxiety, it's part of us. So if you are not going to be mindful of your anxiety, then you cannot control it. So it's like the saying of Sun Tzu, the famous general of China before. In order to defeat your enemy, you should know your enemy first. So our enemy and a friend, right at this time, is our person, and our enemy and friend at the same time is anxiety. So we should know our anxiety. So one way of dealing or knowing our anxiety is to be mindful of it. So that's the psychological part. And then the emotional and the behavioral side is, how does this anxiety manifesting on you? Is it manifesting on you in your chest? in your head that you have migraine, headache, or in your chest that you would always become, you would experience palpitation, or it's manifesting in other forms. Like for example, you are getting rashes, no, or forms of allergic reaction, no, or you would become too crampy, you would become too irritable, and that's the behavioral manifestation. So that's another form of mindfulness. So you are now dealing with your body thing, and of course, no, aside from the body thing, you would also try to check on your breathing. No, so the behavioral side component is also the breathing component, which is very important, because if you who don't have a pattern breathing, then it would become a problem, because that would actually reinforce your anxiety. So, and come to think of it, if you would irregular or not not rhythmic breathing, you would become somewhat, like for example, you are fainting, no, and then eventually you would have some forms of dizziness, and then you would faint, no, you would lose consciousness. So the mindfulness also would also tackle the aspect of breathing. So we have to breathe in, breathe out, pattern. As I said, when you say pattern, it has a rhythmic cycle. For some, you can start with 3 rhythmic cycle. So I'm into yoga right now. No, I'm talking about, but this is not yoga. This is not they can. This is non-canonical thing I'm talking about. No, this is based on psychology. So the breathing component. So 3 cycles. When you say 3 cycles, you breathe in, and then you count 1, 2, 3, and then you breathe out, and then you breathe out, count 1, 2, 3 again, and then if
so
it's
you're suggesting meditation, Doc? Meditation, in other words.
Yeah, actually,
More or less, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not using the word meditation, because there are people who are not who do not like meditation, because it has some spiritual and religious connotations.
Dogmatic connotations, right?
Yeah, so that's why I mentioned it's not non-canonical, so
Okay.
so there's no canon involved here. So it's basically psychology and common sense actually at the same time. So that's
maybe
yes,
we can ask our good friends who are into yoga or into meditation, if they want to go there. But from your psychologist background, you recommend that, the one that you mentioned. Aside from that, though, how does exercise and diet play in keeping your mind healthy? Because I think those are the 2 things that we did not talk about. I think exercise and diet probably is crucial to your mental health. Am I correct, Doc?
Yes, sir. Of course, we should also do some forms of physical exercises, and because this is actually a change of habit. So instead of going out to the office, doing some taxing, physical or strenuous work office activities, we are now confined at home, and maybe for some, when they are constricted in a tiny space, that's why instead of doing something physical, they would just rather sleep or stay on their bed for the whole day. So that's one of the thing that can we do to tackle our mental health crisis is a form of exercise. So physical exercise is a good way of coping also with this crisis. And also, of course, when we say diet, we have to watch also our diet. And then um, there are people who would become lazy. They would no longer cook. They would just prepare some instant foods on the table. And I think that would be also detrimental to the health as well. So, and in fact, there are clients that I have met online, and they mentioned to me that they are getting, fatter. So let me use the word fat, meaning they're gaining some weight, and it added, to their anxiety as well, knowing the fact that they are having weight problems, and then this quarantine has added exacerbated their weight problem. So it would add another form of stressors as well to the person. So I think we should also watch our diet. So as I
Do
said,
you recommend a specific kind of diet, Doc, in terms of food? Is there food that's health friendly to the mind, as well as a specific number of minutes, perhaps, when it comes to exercise? Do you recommend anything specific in those two departments, exercise and diet specifically?
I cannot say no what specific because I'm not into nutrition. No, that's beyond my expertise. And with regards to the physical exercises, no, so I'm not in also that is also not my expertise. But if based on my readings, now as a gestalt therapist, when I say physical exercises that would actually connect the body to the mind, and one of that exercises I would say is those are reflective physical exercises, like for example yoga. It's a reflective exercise actually because it would make you connect to your person, to yourself, and that's why it has the benefit is not only physical but it's also psychological and emotional. So another form of exercise is Pilates. That's also a good form, and there are many exercises that you can actually do. Tai Chi, no, Asian exercises are good actually, not only for the mind but also for the brain, for our body as well. No, and with regards to nutrition, as we know, no, our temperature is getting higher, and in fact, we have registered around 53 degrees. I think that was the other day. So I think if we are talking about diet, then we have to drink many. We have to take many fluids, no, plenty of fluids, because of not only because of the fact that we are under quarantine, but because also of the weather changes that we have right now. So I think Zig, I think it's more of drinking more fluid, and at the same time eating the proper food, vegetables and other stuff that are good for not only for the body but also for the mind.
Look, since the invention of the internet, since the invention of social media, most of us, a majority of us have into the World Wide Web. 7.8 billion of us, most of us at least, and now all of us, 7.8 billion people, are now experiencing the same thing. Doesn't that fascinate you, Doc? This looks like a huge experiment, right? Quarantining the entire world, the entire country, for 45 or so days. What do you think will happen to us, Doc, after all of this? Mentally, Doc. I mean, like generally, how do you look at the world post Corona or COVID-19? How does it look like? Do you think, from your psychologist perspective? Because
Actually,
it looks like a grand experiment.
Yeah. If this is an experiment, actually, then we can surpass this experiment, because as we know, human beings are very resilient, and resilient as we are, we can cope with any forms of threat. It could be physical, psychological, emotional threat, and in fact, we have been into countless, wars, conflicts, unmade natural disasters, and we are still here. No, we can cope. Though there might be some forms of changes, in our undertaking in the future. Like for example, we will have a new norm, and though some people has exaggerated, no, they have exaggerated this concept of new norm actually. But as you can see, every century, every decade, and I think every millennium, there are actually changes, and we have to change our norm from time to time. We just don't know it. But at this particular time, because it has been emphasized, so that's why the what they call the new norm uh, um, would also be exciting. So that's why we should embrace the fact that there will be a new norm coming.
So, Doc, this looks like a grand experiment, right?
Yes,
everybody is on lockdown for 30, 45 days, in some countries even 90 days. So how will the Homo sapien come out of this sort of grand experiment mentally? Are we going to come out of this different people, or is it going to be business as usual right after this?
So if this is an experiment or this is a test, then we can actually pass this test. And if we're going to recall our history, we have many test before, and this is one of the tests right now. So I think we can pass this. And when we say pass this test, it's because of our resiliency as a person. As we know,
Okay.
we are a very resilient, resilient organism. We we can cope, we can adapt, we can adjust to any situation, whether it be physical, or it could be physical, psychological, or emotional, or it could be situational. Like for example, if there's a disaster, if it's man-made, natural disaster, or changes of routine. And in fact, when we say new norm, it's actually nothing but we call that before as a zeitgeist, or meaning the spirit of the times. So there would be a new spirit of the times after it is. And we can, as a person or as a human being, then we can still adjust. We can cope. So we will have new routine, of course. But just like any changes, there are actually compromises. And there are as well sacrifices. And there are many people who would have difficulty adjusting. And some of these people might have encounter problems, not only physical, but also emotional and psychological as well. But generally, I think the world can adapt to the new, to the new order. So it's a new order actually that we will have soon.
So you think we are resilient and we will be able to come out of this one alive? Are we going to come out of this one unscathed? Or will there be parts of this that will be traumatic to us, and or some, maybe perhaps for some of us it might reveal something about ourselves that will become either a good thing or a bad thing. When we were on lockdown, maybe it reveals our true selves, perhaps. I don't know.
Yes, of course, we will come out, bruised, battered, and beaten.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, we will come out bruised, battered, beaten. But there are people who would come out though bruised, but a winner. And there are people who would also be on the other side, who would be loser. But technically, these are just some terms that we can use: winner or loser. For those who are not coping well, we can say they did not win. No, they did not win the battle, but actually maybe for another battle, or for the succeeding episodes of this war or this debacle, they would actually become victorious as well. So if we have this sense of social support, we have this what they call community support, wherein we can help each other, we can support each other, then I think those who are on the other side, the loser side, would just be minimal, meaning they would just compared to the winner side, then they would just a negligible number of the population. But that's the ideal scenario, of course. Yes, sir.
The ideal scenario being that only a few of us will be traumatized, if you will, by this lockdown, this pandemic. You know what, Doc? I hear this all the time, and I tend to believe that it's true, that we're all social beings and we need to interact with each other, not just like this, using this technology, but you really have a sit down with somebody, have a beer, shake somebody's hand, hug somebody, kiss somebody, pat somebody in the back, because there's so many things that are lost when you're just talking to somebody using technology, right? I mean, you really can't see my entire body language, for example, or you don't exactly know, maybe I made some sounds that I didn't let you hear, or something like that. So, Doc, how is this affecting us now that we can't hug each other, we can't shake each other's hands, we can't do all these physical things that are prohibited in this social distancing protocol?
Yeah, actually, it is affecting us actually, because human beings do need physical intimacy as well. So not only social, like for example, in a form of communication, but communication. When we say communication, it is not only verbal communication. You also need some forms of physical communication, like for example, hugging, kissing. Those are actually our intimate, primal, and primitive need. As a being. So this would surely affect us also. But if you are confined in the house, as I said, also spend some quality time with your family, and not only quality time talking. We can also, ask for some forms of physical intimacy or affection as well, physical affection, like even just by tapping the person, on the shoulder, on the back, or caressing the head of the person. That would do good to the person. So it's beneficial, and in fact, that's why massage, whether it's hard or soft massage, whether it's a form of shiatsu or just a simple Swedish massage, it has same beneficial effect because of our need for physical affection.
So it is crucial that we get that. And so what happens to somebody? What happens to a human being if he lacks that for a long period of time? What happens to him? Let's just say let's have a thought experiment. Let's just say this person is all alone and hasn't touched anybody for, let's say, the duration of the lockdown. What happens to that person?
Actually, we have a term before. It's no longer used now. Though we call that psychological marasmus, or emotional marasmus, because of the fact that a person, as I said, marasmus meaning malnutrition. So meaning there's an absence of a nutrition. In this sense, what we're talking about is physical nutrition or nourishment in the form of physical intimacy. So it would affect the person not only psychologically and emotionally. The person would become irritable, and not only that, the person would also become alienated, meaning the person would have a sense of aloneness, and this aloneness would become become loneliness, in the sense that the person would feel alone, that the person no longer has someone to talk with, to communicate with, and eventually it would affect the psychological and the emotional side of the person, that the person would feel inadequate. And with this inadequacy, the person could no longer become healthy relationally. So meaning he could no longer relate to other person, to the environment. So what would happen to the person? Eventually, the person would not survive, because of the fact that it would make the absence of physical nourishment it would lead her to experience inadequacy or deprivation. So if I am deprived, inadequate to my person, then I could not relate to other person, because I no longer know how to relate to the other person because of my absence or my inadequacy.
Look, I am a huge NBA basketball fan, right? And at this time, I would have been watching scores of the basketball teams, and the records of the basketball teams. Now I'm watching the number of people who have died of coronavirus, of COVID-19. I'm watching people who are positive. So I've been watching a lot of television, a lot of news every single day. In fact, I think I probably watch like an hour or two of bad news every day. Is that unhealthy, Doc? And should I stop watching the news altogether, or is there a healthy amount of news that I can watch every? It might do something to my brain. That's what I'm asking about.
Yes, sir. It would depend really on how you would assimilate the information. If you are chewing the information before taking it in, then that's healthy. But if you would just take the information hook, line, and sinker, without assimilating, without chewing, the information, whether it is good for you or not, then that would be a problem. So, and of course, there are people who would want to hear information daily, moment to moment or moment by moment. Then that's good, as long as they can take it, they can chew it before they would swallow it in. But if you're gonna swallow it in, then it would also integrate with your person, and it would add negatives. It would feed your hungry negative side, that once you would feed to that particular person the negative side, and it would become a negative part of you, then that would become a problem also. But if it's no negative, and then you would be able to integrate it into your side and to translate that into something positive, then that would become also a positive part of you. So what I would meant to say is that there's a chance that those information with, even if you are good in assimilating, it would eventually become a poison on you, that it would become a toxic entity in your being. So it would the I think the remedy for that is to be aware. So we will go back to the thing that we called mindfulness. So we would be aware. We should be aware of what information to take in, what information to chew in, and to take in or to swallow in into our system.
Doc, I'm kind of confused. When you say chewing it or absorbing it, hook, line, and sinker, you're obviously talking about the way you could digest, if you will, information. How does one chew it, and how does one able to absorb everything that he reads, hook, line, and sinker? Is there like a technique for that, or it really depends person to person?
There are actually persons who will just accept news, whether it's a true news or a fake news. They would just accept it as a reality, and then they would readily admit that to their system, and it would become part of their belief, their prejudices, and then they're this their
How does
biases
that
as
happen?
well.
How does it happen? Aren't we all screening machines that we all filter information based on the spectacles, the glasses that we have developed over the years? Isn't that automatic? Na by tao yun nga, whatever it is that he sees, absorbs it without some sort of filter?
There are actually, whether even if we have filters, our filter is also laden with bias. Like for example, if you are biased for this, then you would of course not listen to the other side, and you would take in this bias as if it's true, even if it's true to that particular context, but not true to all or to the other side, to the other context. Let us give, for example, the political scenario right now. So if I am biased for this particular group, then I would take in whatever the group would convey in the social media as the truth, without looking at the other side. So even if it could be applicable to this particular situation, but not applicable to all. So you would take that in, of course, thinking that it's a good information that could feed your curiosity, or your hungry for knowledge or information. You would take that in. So without, of course, assimilating if it's really true or not. But it's good for your system, as I said. But if you would always do this, taking in as if it's good, even if it's good for you, it would become a poison eventually. So that's why it would become toxic. That it would feed your bias against the other group or against the other entity. So it would feed your bias. So that's why it would become a part of your belief, and it would become part of your prejudices and biases as well. So it would become toxic on your part, because that would always lead you to believe in the illusion that you are always correct, or that this particular belief is always the truth or the correct one.
The illusion of always being incorrect. How does one always correct? How does one get to that point, though? Because I have spoken to so many people who are like that. How does one get to that point where they think they're always correct? I mean, like, what is that? Is that a character flaw? Is that something that can be fixed? What is that?
Yeah, actually, it's a character flaw, but in fact, we call that narcissism. So we always think that we are right, and people, though we are all narcissists, and there are what you call pathological narcissists, who'd always believe that they are right even if they are wrong. So if talking about information, if the information that would always come into your person will always feed this particular narcissism, then it would become a pathological narcissism, because now you would no longer believe that you have the capacity or the tendency to also to commit mistakes, that you have lapses as well as a person. So because of the fact that the information that would come to you would feed into your narcissism. So that's why I said it would become toxic. But there are people who would no longer know if it's toxic for them or not. And that would become a problem. So that's why the toxicity of that particular information would become part of the person, and that person will become toxic as well, not only to his person, but also to the other part of the family and eventually to the society. So the toxicity will not only affect his personal side, but also the relational side as well, affecting the family and the community as well. So as we can see, if you're talking about information, there's no such thing as a harmless or harmful or whatever. So, communication is neutral, but if you're gonna, it depends on how you're gonna take that into your person.
Speaking of information, Doc, it is in times of pandemics, especially, that there are so many conspiracy theories. I'm sure you've heard of all these conspiracy theories being woven out there on the internet, especially on social media. And we all know that, there is no such thing as, there's only the truth. There are objective truths. You cannot have it any other way. There's a scientific truth, there's the objective truth, and whether you believe in it or not is irrelevant, because the truth is the truth. My question, Doc, is that because of the internet, because of this wealth of information, it is possible that you have a certain bias, right? You have a certain belief
Yes, sir.
system. Kunya, you will keep on continually searching for that bias, and it continually pops up on your feed, because the algorithm feeds you information that you want. So it's possible you have been believing in the wrong thing, and you live in a bubble. Your whole entire life is based on a lie, because everything that you believe in is being fed to you on social media, and when you search it, whatever you think is true appears to be true. So you live in a bubble. How do you break a bubble? Like, it is possible to live your life that is a total lie, right?
Yes,
Especially with the
actually,
age of information.
yes, actually, yeah. With this age of information, we have a wealth of information on both sides, the bias for and bias against. So meaning the things that we don't believe and the things that we believe. But if you're gonna say that bias for, then because this bias for beliefs, are also our forms of nourishment for our intellectual needs, for our need for information, for our need for to feed for our mind. Then we would take it in because it's comforting. It's a sort of it's like water. Actually, it's soothing to our senses. Actually, to our thoughts. But eventually, as I said, it would become toxic. But unfortunately, if it would become toxic, the person would sometimes no longer know that it's toxic. Only the other person would know. And sad to say, if the other person would tell you that you are toxic and you have this particular, you have this problem, the other person who is already toxic will no longer listen to the other person. So with regards to this pandemic, actually, so as much as possible, we would listen to all sides. No, so don't just focus on one channel, on one source of information, but look at the other side as well, and then try to weigh in things. So this is what we is actually a good form of assimilation. No, so we assimilate by chewing, by comparing, by being critical to the information given to us in the social media. In this sense, we can be choosy with what to take in, and for those things that we would want to take in but have doubts, though, so we try to dig further by investigating, by doing some research. But unfortunately, some people are too lazy to do some research on the media, so that's why they would really believe on some theories, some hypotheses given by any person. And even if it's very very mundane, irrational, illogical, they would just take it in, without thinking if it's really true or not.
Maybe it's not about laziness. Maybe it's not about laziness, Doc. Because sometimes some people, because of their biases, again, see, it's like research. They keep on digging the facts, but based on their biases, based on their there's a term for that, the confirmation bias, meaning to say,
yes, sir.
whatever confirms their theories, their beliefs, they're going to keep on going to that direction, that rabbit hole, and it's an endless rabbit hole. So, he's probably very, very religious in digging information, but the problem is he's just going to one direction.
Yes, sir. Actually, this quarantine season, we call this his season, of course. No, even though it's not a season, this is actually a good time for reflection. We should reflect on our biases and our, prejudices, as well as on our person. So that's why we can make use of this time to be in quarantine, no, as a form of a spiritual, psychological exercise in knowing our person better. So this is actually, as you said a while ago, this is an experiment. No, so perhaps this is an opportunity for us to test ourselves. No, if you would say that I'm already, already patient, I have already this patience in me, then maybe this is a test for your patience. If it's really true that you have patience, or if you would say that you are already a faithful person, then maybe there's this is a test if you're really faithful, or have some sort of fidelity. No, so
Well,
make use
what
of
do you mean?
this.
What do you mean by fidelity? The fidelity to your belief, or fidelity to what is true, no matter whether you like it or not? What do you mean fidelity to what?
It's an example, sir. For example, if you believe, oh, I'm really already faithful to my belief. No, I'm I have this religious belief, and I'm faithful to it. And then this experiment right now that we're having, as you call it, experiment, then maybe this is a test of your belief. If you really believe in the doctrines that you are that have been imbibed to you by your church. So this is a form of experiment. So let us take this as an opportunity to know ourselves better, and to check these arms that we have right now. If this is our armaments, then we should try to check if this really works or not. So armaments, meaning our weapons, our tools in ourselves that we would use in our daily undertakings, and we have to try to check if it's this really working or not. So, for example, patience.
Doesn't having, you mentioned you brought in your religious beliefs to the table, doesn't that blind you to the other facts as well? If you have these blinders in you, and when you consume information, you just go to that rabbit hole without consulting, the other kind of information, because you have these certain limitations when it comes to the way you look at the world. Doesn't that blind you to everything else if you have, in your particular example, a religious belief, for example?
Yes, sir. So that's downside actually. So if you are already blinded, with what you are, with your belief, then you can no longer see the other side. But as I said, let us take this situation now as an opportunity for us to be reflective and to be critical as well. So perhaps there is a room for doubt already with your particular belief. So why not ask, why is this person talking about this and I'm not believing in this particular person? What is in his idea that is not congruent to my idea? Then perhaps that's a vignette of or a lens, of something that maybe there is something more that than my belief. So in the sense, it would lead to another opportunity as well. So it could maybe crack your egg, give a crack on your egg, on your shell, and then give you another form of view, and it could be a breakthrough actually. So this this situation right now that we have, it could be a break in or a breakout. So this is what we call breakthrough. So breakthrough, it's either breaking into your shell of understanding, or breaking out of maybe for many years you haven't reached out to your family, to your friends because of this and that, because you have conflict, and then you break out because you reach out to the person because you need something to the person, or just you miss the person, and then you have nothing else. You can do nothing because you are in a quarantine. What you need is to communicate with the other person. So that's break out. So it's break in. It's a you found some new part of your person that you have not encountered before. So let us make this situation, this quarantine right now, as a opportunity for us. It's either to break in or to break out.
In this pandemic, Doc, there's so many issues now that you read on social media that are breaking relationships apart. Like people who don't believe in what you believe in, they unfriend you or they block you or whatever. Um, Two issues now that are prevalent are the closure of ABS-CBN. Right? There's two sides to this coin, and also this movie film that came out a few weeks ago, Plandemic. People think that this is a pandemic that was planned, and there are those who believe in it that it is actually something that nobody could control and nobody foresaw. So mag-away, we eventually end up fighting because of all these different points of view. What do you tell our friends on social media, Doc, to be able to prevent conflict, and just let things be? What do you have to speak to them about this? What can you tell them about situations like this?
Yes, honestly, Jigs, I believe that conflict is productive. So let us, if the person would unfriend you, then so be it. So if the person would, fight or quarrel with you, then so be it, and try to see the other side. What benefit would have this? Would this conflict that you have, would be into your person? So there, as I said, there are many opportunities right now. So maybe it's like weeding out your lawn already of the weeds, that are growing in your backyard. So maybe these friends are not really, good plants or good weeds in your backyard. So you need to weed it out. Seeing the brighter side of things, of course, but sometimes you cannot help it. But to lament on the fact that the person becomes so irrational, illogical that the person unfriend us. So that's another part. But instead of reflecting on what the person is doing, try to reflect on your person. So why am I feeling this way? What is in me, that becomes vulnerable of this being rejected, or why I feel being alienated after this friend unfriended me. So what is in me? So it's a form of reflection as well. So let's go back to our person. So we can do nothing about the other person, but we can do something to ourselves, to our person.
Go back to our person. Doc, I know that is a very complicated yet simple concept. What does it mean exactly when you say go back to our person? What do you mean by that when you say that?
As I'm talking about a while ago, it's more of being reflective. So let's go back to our person. So instead of trying to change the situation to the other person, why not try to change ourselves, our person, meaning changing our belief, changing our attitude, or changing our behavior. So instead of cultivating the other person, we try to cultivate our person. We try to cultivate our attitude, our belief, and then hopefully, if the person will come back to us, then he would see that, so that it the what the person has done to us has become a fertilizer for us to do something more productive to our person.
Okay, Doc, this is a COVID-19 issue, but not necessarily. This pandemic has affected all of us, and it is kind of the new normal now because everybody is experiencing this. But is it possible, Doc, that an event in your life, perhaps a traumatic event or some very menial, uncircumstantial, not significant event that happened during your life and you've forgotten all about it already, but it haunts you to bite you back in the ass years after? Are there events in someone's life that happened to them, they probably forgot about it, but it's actually affecting the way they think, the way they feel, the way they react, the way they process information? Is that possible? And what do you call that?
Yes, sir. Actually, the mind does not forget. No, so everything, anything that you have, experienced in the past, even if you were still a child, is in your mind. And some of these are traumatic. Some of these are, called happy. So for those that are, sort of traumatic, then there's a tendency that it would recur because of of triggers. And triggers could be sense of inadequacy, sense of deprivation, sense of alienation, sense of isolation. So these are actually what they call triggers. So this pandemic or this quarantine might trigger these issues that you have in the past. So there's a chance that it would recur, or it would come out into another form. It would develop into another form of distress or discomfort that would become a disorder. So there's a possibility that it would.
So there are things now you thought you have completely and totally forgotten already in life, not just this pandemic, but any event in your life that has happened before and that you completely forgot about, but it actually has shaped you into who you are now because of that thing that you forgot about. Is that possible?
Yes, sir. Especially that we are now, confined in one place, and then being confined in one place, boredom would come in, and with boredom, our mind would wander, and we call that rumination. We ruminate, we think of something, and then there are people actually who would ruminate on the bad things that had happened to them. So they would dwell on the negative side, and then eventually, while dwelling on the negative side, they will dig into their person more and more, and then they would encounter again the demons of their past, and they are opening the gates of hell, the Pandora's box of the past, and it would the devils and the monsters that were inside those boxes are in them right now, and it's because of the triggers, because of the fact that they are being inside of a confined room, alone, lonely, bored. So as I said, it would become a trigger. So.
I always hear this, Doc, and I actually am an advocate of staying positive. In fact, that's the whole concept of my radio show every morning. Is being positive, Doc, something that can be taught? Can you teach somebody to be positive and always look at the bright side of things? Or is this something that is built in and it is in your operating system and you just can't help but be an optimist, or you just can't help but be a pessimist or a negative person? What can you speak about that, though?
Actually, when we say positive, though, but there's a procedure or preliminary before you become positive or you think positive. So you have to be aware of what should be what to be positive with or to be negative about. So we will go back to the thing called awareness or mindfulness. So before we would feed the positive side of us, then we should know what positive side of us that would be feed with. No, so it's like the story of two wolves. No, in Indian tale. No, of having two wolves, and then the grandson asked the grandfather about anger, and then the grandfather told his grandson that every time you get angry, which one do you feed, the bad wolf or the good wolf? So it's like that. So if you're gonna see the negative and the positive as two wolves inside of us, then we should know what character, what type, or what elements that this positive wolf has in us, inside of us, so that we can feed it with our positive vibes as well. No, so let's go back to awareness first before we would think positive, because sometimes we would just think positive and then we don't know what positive means to us, then it would mean nothing.
So, Dylan, it's not a chemical in the brain that makes you positive, or a chemical in your brain that makes you negative. So it is really a step-by-step process that you arrive at. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. Basically, it's a mind thing actually. So it's not if
It's not a
our
chemical in your
brain,
brain.
if our brain, our mind, and our brain is a computer, then we have the hardware and the software, and our software is the mind. So it would depend on what program that you would feed into your into your mind. So basically, if you're talking about positive things, then you should download some programs that are that are positive. So that's why you should know your capacity first. So that's why we would go back to, again, to awareness. So we would know what to become aware, what to feed, you know, what software to use. So basically, it's like that. And then if you're asking about if it's chemical brain thing, then basically it is. And in fact, it would change the chemistry of the brain. Of being positive or being appreciative, it would change actually the chemical aspect of the brain. But
So
it would take
there
time.
are no
Yes, sir.
chemicals in the brain that are more susceptible to negativity, or or chemicals in the brain that are more susceptible to become making the person more positive. There's no such thing.
Actually, there are actually positive chemicals. They call that oxytocin. They
Yes,
call
of
that
course, yeah.
dopamine. Yeah. So these are actually feel good chemicals in our brain. But there are also studies that there are people who would want to experience pain to release this kind of chemicals, and we call that no, the masochist who would want to experience pain to gain pleasure. So technically, so it would really depend on the mind thing. So
So we
so
have the
the
same amount of oxytocin in our brains, all of us, or some people have more of it, some people have less of it.
Based on the studies that I have read, and basically sometimes it would become the issue actually. So that's why medication would come in, because this certain neurotransmitters has become depleted, or it has become, it has been, exaggerated or increased in numbers. So that's why there are actually what they call psychoactive drugs, no, or drugs that is used to treat our, the chemicals in our brain.
So it's possible to have more of one kind of chemical in your brain compared to the other person. So it's possible.
I would say so, though, but that's not the, within my area of expertise. But I have read that there's actually inadequacy or overabundance of this particular neurotransmitters, and that's why we have issues with, with illegal drugs, because of this particular, issue, that it could
So there
boost
are
or it could
people
deplete.
there are
Yes,
people
sir.
who can't help it. Jude, they have a tendency to be addicted, to be drug addicts, for example, or they have a tendency to be always depressed or very negative and all that stuff. So these are things that they can't help themselves, so they have to consult people like you, yeah?
Yes, actually, there are actually. So that's why sometimes, as a psychologist, we would refer our clients to a psychiatrist, no, for medication, and sometimes the psychiatrists will also refer to us, their clients, because they think that they don't need a medication to handle their problem. So basically, it's a two-way process. It's either psychiatrists or psychologists or mental health professionals who do not use medication, who only do therapy or counseling. Yes, sir.
Doc, this pandemic has been going on for a long time now, and I'm sure you have you receive many consultations now. I know that you're doing it online using several facilities like this that we're using right now. In some parts of the world, especially in the West, a lot of cases of spousal abuse have increased, have spiked because of this pandemic. How about here in Cebu, Doc? Have you noticed any trend in terms of based on the consultations that you've been asked to do, what kind of vision and problems we have now with the pandemic?
Actually, based on the news that I have, read and heard and seen on TV, on media, then there are actually domestic cases of domestic violence, and I think one of the triggers is, as I said, the boredom, of being confined in one space, plus the weather changes, the heat, the rise of temperature. These are some factors to consider, actually. Yes, sir. So there are actually incidents of domestic violence happening now.
So also in Cebu, not just in the West, but also here in Cebu, you have you're handling cases about domestic violence. Is that what you're suggesting?
I think I have
In your
encountered.
personal
Yeah,
experience
yes,
now.
sir. There are, I think, two cases that I have. Um, yeah, it's on psychological, issue, psychological violence. no, because of verbal abuse. So it's a not it's not physical actually. So it's a verbal abuse actually. Yes.
Mhm. Um, Doc Tata, as your friends fondly call you, if you don't mind, I call you that. Karon ano. Anyway, um, in this new normal, as they love to call it, the new normal, how do you think this will affect your craft, your field, the field of psychology, especially here in Cebu, in the Philippines? How do you think will your industry, your field, adapt to this so-called new normal?
Um, Actually, we will become frontliners later on. Actually, after this quarantine, because of the fact, as I said, this situation would exacerbate some forms of mental problem, or our anxiety would become, not only at this particular time, but when this quarantine will be lifted, because we would again adjust to another routine, another normal. So maybe I would say, as a psychologist, then we will have lots of work to do after this quarantine, after this pandemic.
So will you be using technology more now that I'm sure there will be social distancing protocols as far as consultations go with your industry? Yeah, are you going to be taking advantage of all of these new technologies?
Yes, but as much as possible, we would try to meet our clients' personal level. But if it cannot be done because of some restrictions, then we would opt for a what you call tele mental health, or telepsychology, or telecounseling. Wherein we would do our craft online. So we would try to do our best, to address the needs of our client, even if it's personal, face to face, or over online, online communication.
Doc, you're not only a psychologist, or you're also an educator, right? You also teach, from what I understand,
Yes,
at Cebu Normal
yes,
University.
yes, sir.
And what are you guys doing there at Cebu Normal University now? How are you going to be adjusting to this new normal? How will the classroom look like in the new normal?
We
New
have,
normal at
yes,
Normal
sir.
University.
We have actually. I think we would do some forms of blended learning. So blended in the sense that we will have asynchronous and synchronous, but at the same time the traditional media. So we would use this online forum, like Zoom or Hangout or Team, and we would also utilize emails, texts, and at the same time the traditional form, like for example, sending some exercises, perhaps in a traditional manner, like snail mail, if that can be done. But of course, if it cannot be done, then we would resort to online media.
Based on what you think will happen, Doc, what are the pros and the cons of less classroom time and more mobile device time for the students? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? And if so, which is which?
It depends on the level. For example, in college, I think online can be done. Full online classroom teaching can be done online. But if it's the secondary level and the elementary level, then I think it would be a problem, because we need some personal interaction with the kids, no? Because kids are different from college students who are adults. They already have some forms of discernment and other things. They're a higher order thinking, so they are more capable of thinking and doing some things online, compared to children who needs the supervision and guidance, not only personal supervision, but other forms of supervision as well. So I think it can be done with the college students, but not on the lower years or the lower levels.
I've always espoused, though, even before this coronavirus pandemic, that psychology, the mind is a very important thing to be a part of the educational system, or even in government, or actually anywhere, any facet of life. Psychology is very important. And I feel that especially in schools and in governments, we don't have enough, psychiatrists, psychologists, in terms of ratio from student to psychiatrist. Because I think, aside from, pouring information, knowledge, and wisdom to the brain, I think we should also keep it healthy. Um, why do you think that is so, Doc? Why don't we have enough psychologists or psychiatrists in schools or any facet of life in general? Why do you think that is so? And should we have more?
Yes, I think we should have more. So that's the ideal scenario. One psychologist for every 500 students, or one counselor for every 500 students. We have actually guidance counselors in schools now, but not all schools have guidance counselors. So that's
But
why,
not enough. But not enough, right? And
yeah,
they're
but
not even psychologists or psychiatrists, right?
yes, sir. So that's why um, we would want to have a psychologist as well in different schools. So that's why
Mhm.
we are lobbying, our group. We're trying to lobby that there should be a school psychologist aside from a guidance counselor in every school. But of course, that's the ideal scenario. But for the meantime, while we are inadequate with mental health professionals in every school, then we would try to address this problem by giving trainings, giving talks, or giving sort of support not only to the guidance counselors but also to teachers as well. So that's why uh, there are actually activities, no, on mental health, that are being um, transmitted down to those who are in the classroom. So they have teachers who are trained in doing sort of a supportive communication or therapeutic communication to students who are experiencing bullying, to those who are experiencing crisis situation in the house. So there are actually trainings now, sir.
Um, Doc, one of the reasons why most of the countries in the world are reacting to this pandemic anemically is because most of the people in government are not medical professionals. For example, here in Cebu City, do we have a doctor here? Do we have somebody who's aware of what a pandemic is? And do we have psychologists who will know how to react and how to treat people when there's a pandemic? Do you think there should be more people like you in government as well, Dom?
Yes, sir. As much as possible, we would try to spread our oats. meaning psychologists should spread out. So unfortunately, there are many constraints right now. Like for example, on matters of policy, there's we call that plantilla item. There's
Mhm.
only one plantilla item for this mental health professional in this particular office. So we would have sort of great role to play. As a just a psychologist, we would lobby for additional number of personnels, not only in the school but also in the government facilities, especially those that are catering to the social services.
So what can
So,
we do, Doc? We have viewers out there who believe in what we believe in, that there should be more mental health professionals, there should be more psychologists, psychiatrists in schools, in governments, in city hall, in the capital, anywhere, in Malacanang. We should be able to look at our problems here in the Philippines, this country, not just from a medical or a doctor's perspective, but also from a psychologist and a psychiatrist perspective. What can we do, Doc, as citizens of this great country of ours? What can we do to help move our cause to having more mental health professionals in schools and in government?
I would say that as a community, then we should ask your barangay captains or your barangay officials, to address not only the social services need or social needs of the person, but also the psychological and the mental needs of the community. So I think as a as a community member of the community, then I think we should also advocate for mental health, not only not to our family but also to the community. So that's why I would always I would encourage the community members to emphasize the need for a mental health. in the community.
Is there a website that you can lead us, Doc? Maybe a Facebook page, anything on the social media realm that you can lead us to, so that we'll get more traction and get more people on board?
Actually, there are many social media group on psychology, on mental health. That they are, they are very active in campaigning for this. So I think I would mention, because it would be a form of advertising.
Go ahead, sir. Feel free.
So, I want. Sorry, but they can actually visit. Yeah, but they can visit it actually over the internet. Yeah, there are many actually, especially here in Cebu. Cebu is a very a very active community, and we have many members actually, or many mental health advocates. In
so you can mention your own particular website if you like.
Yeah, I have a clinic. It's a psychosomatherapy, but we are not advocate. We are not an advocacy group. But there are actually, like for example, there's what they call well-being cluster. We also have the psychology group. I forgot the name. No, there are many actually. Yeah, so they can just check it out and then join.
And if they want to consult you, Doc Tata, where should they go?
They can actually reach me online over my FB. My name is Emmanuel V. Hernani. You can search for me there over FB, and then you can also search for my clinic. The name is Psychosomatherapy, meaning psycho meaning mind, and then soma meaning the body. So it's a mind-body therapy actually. So you can search that online, and then you can contact me through there.
Doc Tata, before you go, I will ask you for your final message. We have a lot of students, maybe perhaps some of them your students who are watching this interview right now, and just people in general. They're going crazy. They're going insane. They don't know what to do. What's your message to them to help them keep their sanity? Doc, go ahead.
The first thing that I would want to say is for them to hang on. No, hang on. No, do not hang out. No, hang on to people. Hang on to your family, and to the hope that this crisis would be over soon. And this would actually be over soon. I promise. So that I think what I would want to say is there's hope actually, and there's we as a human being are we are resilient. We can surpass this. We can actually overcome this crisis.
There you go. Thank you so much, Doc.
Thank you, sir.
I wish we could do this one live, person to person, maybe in a bar one of these days with
sure.
with a bottle of beer or some scotch or some coffee, whatever it is your poison is. Thank you so much, Doc Tata.
Thank you, sir.
Emmanuel, Villoria, Hernani, thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you. I could have gone for hours talking to you, but I know you have somewhere to go, somewhere to be, and people to consult. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Doc Tata. Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Thank you so much. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Doc Tata, Emmanuel Villoria Hernani, and of course, here on Alive, my search for the best way to live. This is our mind in lockdown mode. My name is Jiggy Jr., and this show is brought to you by our good friends from Organic Acai. If you want to stay healthy in these very trying times, make sure you guys have the right amount of sleep, proper exercise, the right diet, and do what I do and take a bit of Organic Acai to keep me healthy. Thank you so much, and you guys take care, okay?